everybody. Hey, guess what? I know I usually wait a few extra seconds, and I usually do, but guess what? Ed's still kicking, which is good, I guess. Um, yes. Hooray! Yeah. But enough time to be able to get the coronavirus from being up there in Portland area he's at. So today is Saturday, February 29th, 2020. And Ed, why don't you take it away?
Okay, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I'm going to get into a couple topics tonight that we need to do. But yeah, the coronavirus is spreading around. It is all over Portland now. And that is a frustration that people are not discussing and talking about. Just like people don't discuss the truth, you know. They don't educate the children. They don't tell the truth. And that's the problem we are living with today. So it is a frustration we are living with. So it's just one of those things of who, what, why, and how to solve the problems of the issues we have today on the table. So, and we have the structures of how to solve them, but it depends on if the general public wants to solve them or not. So that's the problem that we're living right now today is who, what, why, and how. So anyhow, I want to get into the other topic dealing with the 13th Amendment. We're still going to be going on with the 13th Amendment. I want to bring that up to a good point here because, see, that's the one thing that people got to realize that when it comes to electing public employees, they're not to be in office. And so when they're allowed to be in office in a democracy, and this is the one thing, it's so frustrating what the democracy is doing is destroying your families. And people don't see it because you can't see it, you know. Everybody's going, oh, we need rights, we need this, but you have rights. The native treaties and the Constitution gives you rights so long as that you don't cause personal or property damage or cause harm to another. And harm basically is physical harm. It's like sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me if I grow up little children. And that's the point. We got so soft that we're not educating the kids on the real facts and truth how to defend themselves. We're not educating them, you know, if you got a punk that's starting a fight in school, I mean, we used to always just, you know, the punk started, we just beat him up. You know, we didn't play this, you know, fancy-wancy softy game to make men just little wimps. Because there's very few real men in the world today in the last 35 years. All of them are little wimps. You call them names, they turn around, bow their head, and cry. You know, so it's disgusting what's going on in our country today. So, but I want to get into, and so people comprehend, that way you understand, and I'll be posting this up on the website so you can actually read the court system. Because it's like the one thing is that 28 U.S.C. 3002, Section 15. The state that is the United States is a corporation and not a government. You got to remember when people say, oh, my government, they're not talking about a government. They're talking a fictitious corporation that is the structure of the Vatican City, City of London, and Washington, D.C. And also, too, let's not forget, New York City is part of Washington, D.C. New York City is not part of New York State, part of the Union, and not part of our country. So this is the point when it goes into the structure of the laws, it gets into stating what the laws, and this is the one thing that people need to comprehend, that, you know, the Washington, D.C. Incorporated of the Columbia River, the Columbia District of Columbia is owned by the Queen of England, the same as Hawaii is owned by the Queen of England. Obama said he was born in Hawaii, and let me tell you, folks, Hawaii is not part of the United States Incorporation. It's part of the United States of Code 283002. And you need to read this stuff, Washington, D.C., and this stuff is a foreign corporation. So people are out there defending the foreign government, and they think they're a patriot when you're defending a foreign government called the Queen of England. So you can't call yourself a patriot because you don't even know what the hell a patriot is. And if you go back to the structure of patriotism, that goes back to the 14th century where everybody in England called themselves a patriot to the king. So, you know, people use patriot, that's why I have a problem with the word patriot, because it is a foundation of England, and then we're adopting it in our country. We're thinking we're a patriot, and, you know, you don't realize what a patriot is. So the one thing is the 13th Amendment was ratified. It was put in place, and that was in 1864. And so when you actually read the administrative rules and these laws, you realize that there is no titles of nobility, such as attorneys and lawyers cannot hold public office, cannot be in a courtroom. Judges, lawyers, and attorneys cannot be in a courtroom. Those courts are for tribunal courts. And so when you get a traffic ticket, you're going in a tribunal courtroom. You're not going into a real court. That's why I always recommend that people ask the judge for his oath of office, ask him what district he's in, ask him, because there's 6 districts to the court system, and they're all British. And so you want to know if you're going into an American court system. And when you go into an American court system, that means you have a jury by trial. And that way, if you do go into a jury by trial, you have to make sure you file the paperwork to prove that they are all, as you get this point, all that are not elected and public employees or private contractors of such government agencies, city, county, and state. And so you have to realize that city and county and state in these points was done. And that way, people keep going, the 14th Amendment was ratified. Well, based on the congressional records, when they actually went back and did this in 1967, the 14th Amendment could not have been ratified, period, because it was not a constitutional government. It was a corporation government of the Roman Catholic Church, and you can type in on the internet your 2 constitutions. You'll see your 2 constitutions coming up with the Native Indian Treaty with the Constitution versus the Roman Catholic Church, the District of Columbia, and that is the King or the Queen of England right now. And so when it comes into this point, and you got to remember, everybody keeps going, the 16th Amendment was never ratified for taxes. Bullshit. They'll lie to you. They said the 13th Amendment was ratified in the 1932 or 1931, and then it was passed in 1933. It was the Bankruptcy Act, but the Bankruptcy Act, that's when the British government went bankrupt to we, the people of this country. The King of England's bank went bankrupt. And so that's the point you need to comprehend. So in the 17th Amendment, when it comes to everybody going, we have the rights to vote, and we did all this stuff to the rights to vote, we have these rights. The 17th Amendment gives no woman the right to vote, because prior to the 17th Amendment, when it came into the structure, the only ones that had a right to vote was men who owned land. And if the woman owned the land, she had a right to vote equal to the man. So there was no discrimination when it comes down to it, because when it comes down to it, if the man didn't make the woman happy, the woman didn't make the man happy, neither one were happy, so you get to how that works. Works the same way of that today. There's no difference in 200 years or 2,000 years in the same structure. So when it comes down to these is realizing what the amendments really mean, because everything after the Civil War is called, what do they call that? Administrative rules. So these are administrative rules of the British government. And so when you go into 1967 and you realize that when Congress did it, not anybody who wants this, I'll be posting this up on the talk show. I will be posting up the entire structure of the 17th Amendment on the talk show tonight, and it's 107 pages that I put together on it. And that includes the real Treaty of Oregon, because Oregon has a treaty with the British government. Oregon is not a state of the Union per se, because they call it the 50 states of the Union, of the de facto. But see, the de facto is only 48 states of the Union. Everything after that, the 50 states, is a corporation. And that is a government of still under Washington, D.C., subject of the D.C. Structure of that. That's why I ask people, and I suggest people go do search on Section 8 of Washington, D.C. law, and you'll see how the city codes and administrative works, because when you pay your state and federal income tax, including your property tax, goes to Washington, D.C. 40% comes back to the people, as they call it, but that goes back to elected and public employees of your city, county, and state. That's only 40% that comes back, and that's for their party and whatever they want to do with it. The rest of it goes to pay off the king and queen's debt and the Vatican. And the Vatican makes out like a killing because the Vatican makes all this money off of you. And everybody keeps donating homes and money to the Vatican, and, oh, God's going to save you. God's going to save me. Well, I don't know. I haven't met God yet, and I've been dead more than once, and, still on oxygen, still with heart condition. Just got out last Wednesday for heart surgery, and so I might end up going back in later this week. We'll see what happens. So, I got issues that are going on myself, and so that's what I'm saying, is research this stuff. Because, see, they can't try to convince you that the 50 states are disordered government. There's no 50 states in the Union because Hawaii is still owned by the Queen of England of 1866. That's why Hawaii still flies the King's flag, the Queen's flag, the British flag. Alaska technically is no man's land, even though that we purchased Hawaii in 1966, 1967 was when Hawaii joined the Union, what they call and that's the Corporation Union, just like Alaska was purchased by the Corporation Union. And so it is so simple when you start really comprehending what real facts and real history is compared to the direct lies we've been doing. And remember, your name in capital letters when you get a bill, when you get a deal with your name on capital letters. That's the Queen of England today is telling you that I own you. So that's why I suggest that you file your rights to own yourself. Especially when it comes to your children when they're born. Don't register your child with the state because if you register your child with the state attorneys and the Bar Association owns your children outright. They don't have to do that. If you claim you're a United States citizen, okay, you are a British slave. That's why when people come in from foreign countries, they get citizenship. Remember, it's called a ship, so you're on a ship, and so that is the deal. That's why when you do mailing and you do a green card, it's like the same thing on the green card in the mail is when you do in this country, is a green card when you come in from a foreign country. So when I mail my instruments and stuff like this, dealing with the House, Senate, and local, which I'm getting ready to mail because I'm going to decide I'm going to run for county commissioner, I'm going to be using a green card. I want them to sign the green card. I'm going into their territory, a foreign district, District of Columbia, so I need a green card to go in them, identification. That's where this Real ID Act is coming through. So the Real ID Act is what you can't fly between more than one state. You can't do anything internet. But that's where you have to file your rights and file so it's recognized. And so I did file mine with the Secretary of State. I have that in the media. It's been around. And so you want to make sure that you file to own yourself. You want to make sure you file to own your children. You want to make sure that with your land is paid off, your soil. Your soil is dirt. That's what you know is real. Land is not real. Air and water. And like Oregon is pushing for this, tax and cap trade. So that way they could charge you to breathe air. Carbon tax. Well, folks, your carbon unit last August, I ended up in ICU again on life support because my carbon in my bloodstream was so low I had another heart attack. So you need carbon to breathe. You're no different than any other thing in the world that breathes and lives off carbon. So they want to charge you to breathe air, and then people want to try to say, oh, no, that's not what it is. Don't get confused and separated by these idiots out there because they're making a buck off you. Because they don't care about their children. They don't love their children. They don't love their bloodline. They could care less because when they do that, they're telling you that money is more important than their own family and their own bloodline. That's most people feel that money is more important than their neighbor. My way of life is more important than your way of life, and that's what the saddest part is we're living. So if you're claiming, and everybody likes to use the word sovereign, don't use sovereign citizen. It's an oxymoron because either you're sovereign or not. But I like to use the term bloodline because then that way the cops and the legal profession cannot turn that sovereign because you're using the word sovereign. Oh, now you're a sovereign citizen. And so then they categorize you as a nut and a threat to the country. So I just say I'm native. And then they go, well, are you a citizen? No, I'm native. I don't want, because when you take a citizenship, that's a title and nobility. And by the congressional law, the only ones who can give title and nobility is Congress. And so you're accepting a title and nobility by using that word. And some people will tell you, oh, that doesn't matter. The word doesn't mean nothing. Yes, it does. Wording means more than you realize. And it really does have that effect on what's going on around you. And then also, too, the British banks and the Britain debt tax and the IRS is under the kingdom of IRS. So citizens pay a portion of their taxes to the Queen of England. And I will be willing to provide this information to anybody who wants it. And it will be posted on this YouTube channel tonight. I'll make sure that's posted up in the next 24 hours. So when you do a 1044 form, it's a foreign tax form to the King and Queen of England. So when you do a 1040 or any tax form, you're agreeing to pay the Queen of England and the King of England their debts that they owe the natives' government. And this goes back to the British Monarch Treaty since 1783, the War of Dependence. And so, like I said, read this stuff, read what it really means with the deal. Because, see, they started paying taxes, and that was the British colonies when they were here paying taxes to the king to come to this foreign country. And so it's so apparent that you pay attention to how the taxes work and the structure works compared to the fantasy that you're living or you've been led to believe. Because the United States pays the taxes to the King and Queen of England. It's that simple. I have the forms. That's why a 1099 form, because when you register your vehicle, you're registering it, so you give your vehicle to the state. And this is one thing I still got to finish the research on. Because if the state is claiming your vehicle as their property under the title registration, then under a 1099 form, we should be able to write off the maintenance and all that to their structure. So they should pay the maintenance. They own the vehicle, so they're leasing it to you. You're asking permission to use their property. And that's technical. You can type up in the internet and go to any dictionary on the internet and type the word title up and the definition of title, you'll see it. It's not ownership. You don't own that vehicle. You're leasing that vehicle for a privilege. And that's what a title actually means. A title to your property is a privilege to your property. It's not ownership. It says it right there. It's right on the structure. And I'll put the title structure up for the deal on the internet too tonight, so that way you can actually see what title actually means. Because the title means, and that goes right to the King and Queen of England. And remember the International Monetary Fund, and that's the United Nations. And see, that's the one thing everybody keeps saying, well, the United Nations is there to protect you, and everybody's getting upset because Trump pulled away from the United Nations and stopped the $3 billion funding going to the United Nations. He saves the taxpayers a major amount of money. The United Nations is still owned by the Queen of England. Look the United Nations up when it started in 1947. The United Nations was founded in the structure of Nazi Germany and the Queen of England. So the United Nations is not part of America. It's not part of it. And that's the one thing you got to realize, that this is how this country, they lie. They lied this and bring this up, and this religion. They lie about it because they got to make the money. They got to convince you what it is. So, and taxes are non-refiable. So you don't want to get into that, because when you're paying taxes, you file taxes. That's how they come after you and say, and then people will file taxes and they go, well, I want to rescind my contract with them, and so they can't come after you. No, you got to rescind their contract and have a letter stating that from the IRS, or not pay your taxes for more than 5 years before it becomes their administrative rules. So read their administrative rules before you decide to do something with the IRS, because the IRS will come after you with, trust me, they tried to do that to me and it didn't work in 1993. So the debt agents, of the foreign Federal Reserve, outwitting state. And so the Federal Reserve note is the Federal Reserve of the government, of the British government. People don't realize people talk government, and you're not talking a de facto government. You're talking the Queen of England and the King of England's government. You're not talking their freedom rights. So, and that's the one thing. If you want to be free, you have to do that. You have to list that you're free. So, and then this is the other point with the financial crisis that they do, other bankers and suicides. Oh, we've been watching bankers committing suicide across the country, and everybody's been seeing that. Well, you get it. Because some of these people didn't even know what they were really getting themselves into until they opened their eyes up into the trouble they got into it. So the 16th Amendment really brings out this point. So federal taxation of the United States individual was never ratified by the states because they couldn't be ratified by the states after the Civil War. Because there was no constitutional government after the Civil War of 1871, and this goes by the Federal Reserve income tax, okay, and the Revenue Act of 1861. And so that's the one thing that people don't realize that, they were trying to put the revenue tax through, and this goes back to 1861. And it was repealed. And not only that, it was repealed when they did it. It was 10 years later. It was repealed because when they put it in effect, they couldn't do it legally or lawfully because it was a corporation government. It wasn't of the people. So, and this is the saddest part that we're living with all the confusion that our schools do to our children, and, when the schools are lying to your children the way they are lying, and then we were brought up this way in the last 30, 35 years, and people don't realize, you're in a corporation of the federal government, the British government. So, and that's one thing, the 16th Amendment, when they try to put the 16th Amendment in, and I have that put together, and that was that if you made over $250,000, they could tax you. Prior to that, you couldn't be taxed. That was the original structure of the 16th Amendment, and that was part of the taxation structure of 1913, and that was the Bankruptcy Act of the King's Bank when he went bankrupt to the people of the United States. And remember, that's the United States unincorporation, not the United States corporation. And so that is the one thing. It had to be done by 2/3 of the Constitution ratified, and they never had any of the ratification because they couldn't do that because it was, like I said, Alaska and Hawaii are not part of the United States. There's only 48 states of we the people, and that was done in the Civil War. Because you can't go after the Civil War and say, oh, I have rights, and that is the one thing. And like I said, I'll be posting this stuff up, and please research this stuff. And that's the one thing that, when the Executive Order 195 was put in place by FDR, that was the tax that children, when they were born, they were given a birth certificate raised at $630,000 apiece. So that's how, all these big cities are building everything and today, because there's no money building it. They have no contracts. There's no funding behind it. But they're creating jobs behind it, and they're creating debt to the new generation of kids for them to pay. So that is the one thing, 28 U.S.C. 3002, define United States Corporation. Section 15, United States mean a federal British corporation. And let me clarify this. When you talk about your government, the federal government, it's a federal British corporation. Agencies or departments and commissions of boards, that's your city, county, state, your administration, your transit boards, any board, your education board, those are all still controlled and under the British government. And this is the one thing, and I've been there. I've been elected official. That's why I'm throwing my name in. When I threw my name in running for office, they told me, "Oh, Ed, you can't run for office because you're not a registered voter." And I said, well, why can't I run for office? They said, well, you have to be a registered voter. And I said, so where's the law? Well, that's administrative rule. And I said, wait a minute. Administrative rule says that I have to be elected before I have to give up my rights and become a citizenship, right? You're like, well, yeah, that's correct. And I have this on video. I'm sorry I didn't. And when I get home, I got to really play that and tape that for next week's show if I do go home next week. So I can play that because I want you guys to really hear it from the clerk himself. Because they admitted that it is a foreign government, and when you're elected official, and believe me, when I was elected official, when I won the school board, local school committee back in 2000, they wanted me to go to a course, and they have classes every time you win an election. They have classes to instruct you how to vote and how to think, and not only that, they want you to be registered in one of your churches in your local churches. So one of the criteria of elected and public servant is for you to be a registered church member. Because registered church members are obligated to pay state and federal income tax and local property tax. And that's a fact. That's an actual administrative rule. So it is so simple when you step out and you start seeing this, and realizing the FCC is a federal corporation. And that's the one thing is that when the FDCPA, Congress evidence cleared intent, included private transactions of debt. So if you owe somebody, borrow money from somebody, technically you cannot take that to a court. You have to deal with that on yourself. So never loan money you don't expect to get back, and that's what it really comes down to. So, and that, it really comes down to these points. Paying attention to what the 13th Amendment really means, the 16th Amendment really means. And so I would always recommend you could type in Section Rules Guidance, Section 16 on your internet, and you'll be surprised what you actually really learn from that. And that comes back to the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934. And so these are things that mainly you have to be educated in these stuff before you start doing transactions. And if you start doing investing, you got to realize that when you invest, you have to pay profits on your interest. So interest and dividends are taxable. Labor is not. And there's a wonderful video that is out there. It's called Theft by Deception. It's an hour-and-a-half video. I do recommend that everybody watches. And you can see that it's on YouTube, and it's a very worth video to watch. So I recommend that people do watch that. And so that's the one thing is realizing what a training officer is, a trading officer. So, and that, and once you start realizing how your system truly works from the mechanism inside out, you start comprehending these stuff. And then, you always want to look at the definitions of these structures of what they were put in place for. Because they're not there to protect you. They're there to protect the Queen of England. They're there to protect the knights. This is where, everybody keeps going, oh, Lord, oh, Lord. Well, look at what a Lord is in England. Okay, your Lord in England is the same in your Bible. It's no different. And that's the same way it's structurally written in the Bible if you read it and comprehend the way the words read. Not what you interpreted or what way you've been led to believe it might read. Look the definition of Lord up in England. It's the same thing as in the Bible. There's no difference. So, and this is the one thing, like I said, it's so simple. Once you put these pieces together and start comprehending how your 13th and 14th Amendment, because everything after the 13th Amendment is a corporation, so you can fight them in court. And you want to make sure when you do go to court, you always want to put a conflict of interest statement in. You want a conflict of interest statement to the judge. You want one to the bailiff. Don't forget one to the bailiff, because the bailiff gets paid by the court system. So does the clerk. So does the secretary. The secretary to the judge. You can put one of them to the secretary of the judge. Because they're all getting paid by the same agency, so they have a conflict of interest because if they don't convict you, they don't make an income. And that's how it is when it really comes down to it. You know, and so you really want to do this and fight on these things and put it in paper. And people will sit there, well, I did it and I went to court and I said that to the judge and the judge just ignored me. You can't say it in hearsay. You have to put it in writing before you go to court, because if you end up in a court of appeals, you know, what you put in writing is what stands in a court of appeals. What you said in court is hearsay evidence. It doesn't exist. It is that cut and dry. There's no ins and outs to it. You know, people say, I could get away with this or I could do that. And when I say in court, you know, I can go back and do it in a court of appeals. Well, I've only seen one case that won. Every other case I see doesn't win. So, and that's the one thing. It's like the building codes in Hawaii, you know. You got to realize that when you're dealing with the British government, this is the way the British government goes. You know, so, and it is paying attention to these circumstances of how the Indian treaties and stuff. You know, in the Indian treaties, and this is Article 2, this is in your Constitution. So read your Constitution, because the Indian treaties in the Constitution supersede the Constitution, and without the Indian treaties, the Constitution does not exist under that structure. And that includes the Treaty of the Laramie Treaty, too, of 1873. And so you've got to read this stuff. And see, that's the one thing. American Indians do not pay taxes on money earned on their land, and that includes the rentals. Anything. Natives cannot be taxed. And so you want to make sure you read this stuff and comprehending. And so if your family bloodline goes back to the Civil War, that means you're native. So don't let them try to say, well, you couldn't prove a tribe. My bloodline goes back to 1890. The 14th Amendment includes native, the word native. It does not say Indian. So that's what I'm saying. Don't let these people interpret words for you as they do. And always respond back in writing with them. Prove this, you know. And you want a certified copy. That way you can hold them personally liable with their home and assets. And remember, if they're a nonprofit agency like police departments, courts, are all nonprofit agencies. So you can file a 5406A form on them. And I recommend people do that all the time anyways. You know, because then that way you're filing on them to prove their income. And if they don't prove their income, they are they're shit for Chinola. And then also, too, Oregon has a sales tax exemption certification you can file for in Oregon. And we'll put that up on the deal. I'll put it on a link by itself. Because you have the ability to put these things in and file on them, but when you file things, also, too, do not use their form. You write your own form, you write your own affidavit up, because an affidavit is a lawful form, and then you put it into their legal form, and you make sure you have both of them. You have your legal and your lawful form. So that way when they try to come back after you and play the game, and Oregon does have property tax exemptions, and I'll make sure that that's put up too. And I'm fighting that one myself right now. And that, you know, most people are compelled to pay taxes, and it violates your Fifth Amendment right if you're native. And so, and I've served this on my county and city, and they tell me that it doesn't matter. And then I argued with the tax collector, and he goes, well, yeah, it does matter. And I said, well, then let's go to federal court, sue me. Of course, they're not going to sue me because they want to try to shoot me off my land, and that's what I was told by the tax collector and the former sheriff. We'll just shoot you off your land. So people won't know because they're already slaves. They already do what they're told. They don't care. They're stupid. That's the way your public employees look at you. You're stupid because you don't know the law. And people go, well, I don't, you know, it's a statute, code administrative. Yes, it is, but you don't know the law. So that's the point, that you're not stating that you don't know what the law is. You don't have a concept what the reality of law, administrative, constitution is. So legal evidence laws containing there are accepted proof of these laws in any court. And this is United States versus United States Bear versus United States, and this is 1985 DC NEB 611, unless Congress basically changes it and enact another code, but they can't, because that's already been put in place, and it says in the structure they can't change it. This is under the Banking Act, because banks cannot own property. They can't own your home. So when they loan you money, and a bank can't loan you their money, they have to loan you somebody else's money by law. So I will get this to you too. And read the Banking Act. Really, that's Title 12. Really read the Banking Act so you get to know what the structure is instead of being played like a fool like these people do to us all the time. And they do it all the time because they know they're going to get away with it, because they know you're not educated. They know you do what you're told. You're a servant. You're a servant to them. And that's exactly the way these people in power look at you, as a servant to them. They don't look at you have rights. You know, and sovereign, and that's why I like to use native instead of sovereign. But sovereign is someone who's not subject to statutes. A person, I always love when people say on the phone when I talk to people, this person, that person. I said, so a person doesn't exist, so who are you talking about? Is it a man or a woman? Say they're a man or a woman. A person does not exist. Realize. You know, that's the one thing. Persons are inanimate objects. And that's the United States people. Sovereigns are over civil servants. Okay? And we have public servants, civil servants. There are servants. Your administrative rules are your servants. And that's the one thing. Statute, administrative rule, color of law is not law. It's all a fraud. See, a statute code and administrative rule is their structure that applies to them because they took a job. When they took a job for the government, they have a different contract. That's why when I run, they told me, well, Ed, then you're going to have to if I will go after it, and if I do get lucky enough to win, then I'll have to do my route, what I'm looking at doing. So I'll cross that bridge when it happens. You know, and this is the one thing, the federal tax lien of 1968, federal tax lien is common law and was not no tax lien. They can lien your property if you're buying it from a foreign company, a foreign corporation, but by law you can't. So it's like, prove what, why, and how, because you're an admiral state jurisdiction, not common courts. And people say, well, common law courts. Well, if you go back to the structure of common law, this is what gets to me about common law, because people say common law. Well, common law says that you have to pay taxes and we can shoot you off the land, and that's common law. That's common law. So I don't go by common law, and people don't know what common law really means, because if common law says majority rules, that's a democracy. So we're allowed, and that's how they get away with it, common law. Oh, you believe in common law, so majority says the government employees own you, so we can shoot you off your land. That's common law, isn't it? Yeah. So that's how they get away with this stuff. Common law says they can murder and kill you. Common law does not exist, technically, and that's by the court system itself. So it is so apparent to read this information and know these differences, you know. And that is the one thing that when it comes down to these circumstances, please pay attention, because the bankers of international law, they don't have authority. They're foreign agents. They have to be registered. And that's the other thing, too, is always ask your public employees if they're registered under Title 38. Or 1938 Foreign Administration Registration Act. And when you do that, file it in your paperwork. And they'll tell you, oh, we don't have to register. Bullshit, they do have to register. They've had statutes that say they don't, but by federal law, they do. Statute codes and administrative are their house rules to cover themselves up, trying not to be indicted or convicted. So that's one thing. No law, and this is going back to Muldark versus Penn, 319, United States, 105, 1943. No state shall convert a liberty into a private license. So a building license, a community license, a driver's license, fishing license, hunting license. I mean, I built my house. They went after me, tried to come after me because I didn't have building permits and everything. I said, prove it. So I built my house. I didn't have building permits and permission. You know, so I mean, it is one of those things. Looking how these things work, looking how this situation is done under administrative acts. And so remember, your D.C. corporation is from the British government. I do like what pisses me off, they're getting rid of "In God We Trust," because to me, I like that you swear in the Bible because I want them, in God you trust, the Bible to come hunt you. Because I believe if you're the structure of the Bible, that gives them the right to crucify you. That's called the Christian Crusades. That's the Bible. It hasn't changed in 1,000 years. So it's just one of those things. And the term citizen means that you're United States. You're obligated to, a subject in common law. So if you're a citizen, whatever rape, rob, and pillaging of the common law applies, you say that it can happen to me in common law. So that's in the laws here, like I said. I'll post this stuff up. I encourage you folks to read this stuff on the YouTube channel. And if I haven't emailed it to me, if you got my email, send it to me or go to the new.org and trackers. Go hit the email stuff. Send me your email. Please send it to me twice so I don't get confused because I get a lot of emails, at least 3 times. And I'll send you the actual congressional records. All right? So you go look it up. I'll send you what I have. You verify it and go look it up and prove one way or the other. Because that's the whole point, how we're supposed to be learning from each other. You know, our schools have failed us. Our public employees have failed us. You know, so this is up to you to educate your children in the circumstances of what, why, and how. And so statute administrative rules are admiralty, UCC law merchants, like, you know, in the Texas Code. It even says this in the Texas Code, or Texas Penal Code, and it says it in each state says it. So it is really simple to the fact of what, why, and how is really out there. So, you know, really pay attention to it. That's why when I always put all my stuff, I always put UCC 308, you know, formerly I-207, reservation of rights, you know, and I always put under, every time I do any paperwork, I always write under duress with that. You know, if you'll look at me and go, you can't do that. Yes, I do, and I never use black pens. Black is dead man's ink, blue is royalty, gold is king or queen, silver ink is knight. So it's knowing what the colors of your ink really means, and that's the one thing, is what the colors of the inks really mean, is what the structure means of the law of the land. So that is the one thing, is to put this stuff out of what the circumstances are there, how it works. And you could even type up Hale versus Hinckley is a good one to read of 1905. And so these laws really do apply to you. And so these are the things that really matter to your children. Because if you don't own your children, that's how the state can come in and take your children without a warrant. And that is the one thing. That's when it comes to jail means loss of job opportunities. They could throw you in jail and says, oh, well, we could take your job opportunities because you're a citizen. Citizens have no rights. They have absolutely no rights in the United States Incorporation. So you have to prove that you're lawful or legal. So, and also, too, I'll be putting up, you want to know the structure about the Queen's Hand Doctrine. You want to know that. And the Patriot Act, you know. So we'll get this up on the YouTube channel, so it's there so you can read it. So anyhow, why don't we open up the floor and go from there?
All participants are unmuted.
Hey, Ed.
Yeah, floor is yours.
Okay, you mentioned earlier conflict of interest form to all the court officers and the judge in writing. How do you do that? Is it like an affidavit or what?
Yeah, it has to be an affidavit, so it's lawful and legal. If it's not an affidavit, it doesn't apply. It doesn't exist. So it has to be it has to be proven as an affidavit. And I can send you, and if you don't have that, and if you have my email, I can send you the circumstances on that, so that way I can get that to you, because I have the whole structure of that. That includes the clerk, the judge, the administrative clerk, everybody involved, including the police officer. You could even do that to the police officer, because everybody has a conflict of interest because they're making an income off of that structure.
Right. Okay. All right.
So you have my email, right?
Yep.
So email it to me, and I'll be more than willing if you get me, double email me tonight, and I'll get that to you tonight.
Okay, sure. Will do. See ya.
All right. You have a great evening. Anybody else?
May I?
Yep.
This is Marshall Meekum in Utah. I wanted to ask you, I heard you say you was going to run for a commissioner?
Yeah, I'm running for county commissioner in Lincoln County, Oregon. I got paperwork.
How do you do that when you're on the land? You're an American state national. How do you do that in the de facto? How do you?
National.
How do you do
I
that?
never use the word national. National under the Immigration Act and the structure of the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. If you are a citizen or national, you are an enemy to the United States people. So I never use national. I use the word native, and I don't use the word sovereign, because they always twist sovereign to a sovereign citizen. So, and that's part of what happened to, what was his name, Doucette. And a lot of those people, when people went down that road, and I was trying to explain to them on talk shows back a few years back, be careful with the way you're filing these paperwork. That's how they got Bruce Doucette as domestic terrorist, because he never had a conviction for him to file to do it legally. So that's how they were able to get Bruce Doucette for domestic terrorist. So I tried to explain that to him. And, of course, him and everybody learned from we know who, and so that's why a lot of people ended up in jail. So I never used the word national, because under the 1913, or then, what is that? Wait a minute. I'll get it here in a second. That was the FBR bill of 1913, administrative rule that put the birth certificate as a payment bond. And it says nationals and citizens are enemy. And I will actually email that to you so you can actually see the clarification through the lawyers themselves, how the lawyers actually state it and clarify it. You there?
That would be. Yeah, I'm here. I'm just thinking, Bruce Doucette and Steve Byfield, they're the one that made a lot of us marshals, and so I was with them from the beginning. But I always understood the reason that they got themselves, one of the biggest reasons they got themselves in trouble is because, they were supposed to go from the sea to the land, which they preached to all the rest of us to do that, and they didn't do that, and so they got charged with that.
No, the other point is, they didn't even do that because they never had, before they could file the charges on the judges, they had to have a win. So not one of them filed criminal charges and filed on them in a courtroom to prove that they violated their constitutional oath. And I argued with Steve, and I've got proof. I argued with Steve on it. And if you go to Oregon Trackers, and that would have been in 2016, I can't remember what episode, I got Bruce Doucette and Steve on the talk show because they were trying to do this trial with me on my talk show. And I'm trying to explain to them, you guys, you're missing the point what you're going. And I will send you that talk show when you send me an email. So I'll send you that talk show because I was trying to explain to them, don't go this route because this is what's going on. Because remember, this is one thing that Ann Von Ritz was explaining that people do. And Ann Von Ritz had her package of how to get off the system, and file these criminal charges on people, and people were getting arrested and all the criminal charges. It wasn't just Bruce and Steve. There was 30 people who went down.
Yeah. I followed her a little bit. Well, I only believe about 70% of her what she says. The rest, 30, I think she's dead wrong, but that's just my opinion.
Oh, no, your opinion is right, because actually, I don't really believe anything she writes. She writes a lot of stuff, and I have actually taken some of her writing and rewritten it, so that way it was proven correct and compared to the way she wrote it. So she does have stuff that's on the mark, and me and Ann have talked about it before on phone, and and in other conversations, and I'm the one who got her to admit on her own talk show she wasn't a legitimate judge. She's a hearsay judge. She's claiming to be a judge because, when she's claiming to be an Alaska federal judge, I even have it from the Alaskan District Court that says she's never been an Alaskan judge. So she's claiming to be something that she's not, and that's the same thing. Well, I could do that because I'm going on the Continental, but if you go under Continental, if you go back to the original structure of Continental in 1717, Continental was the British government. That was the one who fought the Zulus warriors. So, and that's the first machine gun. That was the Punkett or Pinkle machine gun was the first fully operated machine gun by the British. So,
wow.
and that's the one thing. I don't get caught up in this stuff, and I'll be more than happy to send that one that I did with Steve and all of them on the show, because they were going after, because they tried to come after me, and they didn't like it because I was proving myself right, because I filed my paperwork in the House and Senate. I went after them. And so I didn't sit there and create the paperwork that, they violated this. I went after and proved they violated it. So once you get a court that says they violated their oath of office, you can even file a small claims court for $5,000 on them for violating their oath of office. And once you get a judgment that they violated their oath of office, they lose their oath of office. You get the money on it, not the $1 billion is what they were trying to file, but you get the $5,000 from them personally, but they lose their position, and that means anybody else that they put in jail or had criminal charges filed on them, everybody could sue them for that at that point.
Wow.
It's getting the opening to the door of how the court system really works, and that's the one thing people don't get, how the court system works under Admiralty law. Because they're still going under Admiralty maritime military law. It's military, Admiralty military law. And that's what you're based on, military law. Go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that. So what would you recommend somebody say when you're a state citizen? How would you when you want you?
I call myself a native, because a state citizen has the two conflicts of interest, because I have the administrative rules that says if you want to say you're a state citizen, they're going after saying you're a state citizen, and that goes back into the Civil War, and then they rechanged that under the 1917 with the Trading with the Enemy Act administrative rules. So that's why I like to stay away from the word citizen, because that's where they with sovereign citizen, and that's what got Steve in a lot of trouble, and Bruce in a lot of trouble.
Well, that'll get anybody in trouble if they say they're sovereign. That's automatically going to get whoever says it in trouble.
Right. That's why I just say I'm native. I'm not taking a title of nobility. And native is under the Indian treaties of the structure, and that's under the Lermy Treaty, too, of 1861. So I'm going by the native Indian treaties, and that's the structure of the 1770 Indian treaties, which first started with the British government, because the British government is the foreign agency that has the contracts with the natives in this country. And then you had the Spaniards Treaty, and then that Spaniards Treaty, that became with the Paris Treaty. And that even says natives. It does not say citizen. And even in the Paris Treaty, it says if you say citizen, you're under authority of the corporation.
See, that's what's confusing to me is if we say we're native, that Anawan rice, they'll come to you and they kick you out of all the assemblies, and they kick you off what you're on. They'll say that now you're practicing a dual citizenship.
No, I've been saying I've been native for years. I have been elected employee. I've been a public servant, public employee, and I was a native. I've been elected servant before, and I used the word native. So they can't sit there and do that because I said, well, if you want to do that, let's go to court because we have an Indian treaty that says this, and they don't want to challenge that because they challenge that, they mandatory lose. That goes under the Supreme Court administrative rules. And I'll send you that too. That's the one thing that, like I said, like I always preach, they write it, I quote it. So they write it, I quote what they write because then that way they can't hold me liable. And believe me, I've gone after them tooth and nail. And when I'm getting ready to run for office, I've got a friend of mine that I've always considered Bill Hall or Claire Hall. Now he's going by Claire Hall now, not Bill Hall. But Claire, I've known Claire for 30 years. We used to do talk shows back in the 90s, late 80s and 90s. So, and now he's doing this, and they're doing this transgender stuff, saying that, we got these administrative rules now, under, democracy. Well, it's simple, and that's the one thing I'm going to challenge Bill, or Claire, when we run for office, because the Constitution didn't give you right, the democracy doesn't give you right because that goes under common law. And so if the general public turns against you in common law, then all of a sudden everybody loses. You see where I'm coming from, where common law goes by the popular vote just like democracy does?
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying is we've got the solutions how to come around these things and how to make sure how to protect the bloodline. And the thing is to protect the bloodline, because if our children and the next generation children don't comprehend how this really works compared to what people think it does, that's why I sit there and, like I said, I do, research day in and day out. I read court cases. And if you want, I'll even send you the link to get on the federal court case structure in Washington, D.C. when they have their court cases. So these court cases, I actually read these court cases and go through these court cases. Even when they went after Donald Trump trying to say, Trump couldn't stop immigration, and then they had to go after and say, Trump can do this. Well, because I was writing the 9th Supreme District Court in California, I was serving treason charges on these judges. I have the court email, and I know the judges' names, and so I write the treason charges. I email the treason charges on the judges. And you remember, when I do this stuff, I'm liable. They can come after me and call the marshals and throw me in jail if I'm wrong. Yeah, you realize how severe this really is, don't you?
I do.
So, they wrote the law. I'm quoting the law. Here's the treaties. Here's the law. Here's the structure of the Immigration Act. And here's what you're supposed to do. And that's why they're panicking right now, because if you notice that the Mexican government just finally said, okay, we got to stop having the Mexicans come over, because if we don't do that, basically it's open season on them. And they already had shootings down there in New Mexico. Hasn't been publicized in the media at all, and so they just some of the Mexican border has been closed off, and they do have 20 miles successful of the fence line, 25-foot or 30-foot steel fence up. So they have that, and they already have 100 and something miles of it, and they got, I think it's 400 miles. Well, it's a total of 800 miles of the whole borderline. And so we get the fence line up. We don't have to worry about diseases coming over and all this stuff, because they just got the Crohn disease now in Portland, Oregon. They've got it in Salem. They've got it in other states right now. And the media ain't recording how much of it is, because the airlines let off 200 immigrants off the plane. Was just 2 weeks ago, and I posted that up. There's a link that got out how they released over 200 people got off of the China Airlines with Crohn disease. So that's what they're trying to do, is infiltrate our country, and people don't see it.
Oh, yeah, I see it. I think there's a lot more on the border being killed than we even got an imagination to.
Oh, yeah, there's more that's going to be coming up in our structure that people are going to be shocked when all this stuff really starts hitting. You know, and so that's the one thing when you're doing this, you know, because your tax claims are under a DUN number, those number, and so it is paying attention to how the structure goes. And even if you go back to the United States citizen, this is American citizens have been financially servitude under British monarchs since the Treaty of 1783, War of Dependency. So the War of Dependency, if you actually read it, that's all the foreigners that come into our country that has to pay the tax to the king. You know, so I mean, and that's the point. If you're native, you're not to pay taxes, and I have the actual native treaties in the structure that we're not to pay taxes on this stuff. And that means when you do buy property, always try to buy property with gold and silver, or at least 10% with gold and silver so you can claim the soil. You know, you can't claim land, air, water, but you can claim the soil, because soil you could taste and eat. You know, and that's how they get around the administrative rules on that. I know, I hear you. So, I mean, so this is where it comes down to this structure, where it comes down to how this stuff works. And like I said, the Revenue Act of 1861 is another one to read on these things. You know, so, and I mean, like I said, I'll send this stuff out. I'll be posting it up on the talk show tonight. It'll probably be about 150 links on the talk show when I get done with all this stuff. But like I said, research this stuff. And that's the one thing, and when it really came down to the 16th Amendment, you know, 13 states were not even involved in it. They couldn't even ratify it. And see, that's the one thing that they say, well, it was ratified. It was never ratified administratively. It could not have been done because it was a foreign corporation at that point, because after the Civil War, you know, it became the British government in England again. British government is England, and we're still fighting that today. It has always been a ceasefire. Nobody, it's like Japan. We never had the war in Japan. We never won it. It was a ceasefire. And that's the one thing people don't realize. Majority of your wars were ceasefires. You know, so, I mean, and like I said, it's so simple when you do this. And like I said, Section 16, you know, you can type in SEC rules and guidance, and that'll be Section 16. It'll come up, your Security and Exchange Acts, and read them. It's amazing when you start reading this stuff, what it really says compared to what people are out there interpreting this stuff for you, because when they're out interpreting this stuff for you, this is how people get in trouble. You know, like I said, I'll put that video up on the website too, with them on the YouTube video that we had a conversation, and it's like, you can't claim a title of nobility. The minute you claim a title of nobility, that means you're liable under the administration. And if you know anything about the United States federal government, Congress is still under the Queen of England. It even says it by the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court, if you ever read the headline, the Supreme Court is still run by the Queen of England unless you are not going into their court system. And if you go into their court system, you have to know how to go into their court system. It's just that simple. You know, so, I mean, it's cut and dry, but, I mean, it is a hell of a battle once you figure it out. It's simple, but until you figure it out, you know, it throws people into a turmoil. And you can go look at the Security and Exchange rules and information and read the forms. Sit down and take an afternoon and read the 8 pages or 10 pages of forms. Just scan them. And you'll be amazed what you pick up on those things. You know, it is very interesting, especially with the Indian treaties, because it's in the Constitution of the United States where the Indian treaties cannot be taxed. The Indian and natives cannot be taxed at all. Property tax, deer tax, you know, hunting and fishing tax. California Constitution. Article 1, Section 25, and the California Constitution says you cannot charge for hunting and fishing licenses. I grew up in California. I never bought a hunting and fishing license. I used to fish on the California coast growing up and the piers all the time. We never had fishing license. Used to be in the SNOPs, but they don't have in the SNOPs now. And the only ones that had to buy fishing license technically were elected and public employees, church members, and foreigners that came to the state. If you were native to the state, you're not obligated to buy a privilege to feed yourself.
May I?
Yeah.
Just want to ask, I went to court here a while back with a native Indian, and they give him every charge in the book. I couldn't figure out. I tried to explain to him some of this stuff about his rights, but they didn't give him any of it. And I was just wondering, why wouldn't they recognize that?
Because he didn't recognize it.
Okay. That's kind of what
I'm dealing with a friend of mine in Arizona. He's Indian, and he keeps going, I'm fighting it my way, I'm doing it this way, I'm doing it that way, and I'm going, you're a damn ass, because here's what the law says. You're native, how come you're not fighting it under your treaty? I'm not going to do it, I'm doing it my way. And I said, well, that's why you're not getting anywhere. Because you're not fighting it by law, you're fighting it by a statute. You see where that's just that simple.
Okay.
I've been dealing with this guy for years. I even wrote a deal I went against the sheriff 2 years ago, filed the paperwork for him to file on the sheriff of the county, and he wouldn't file the paperwork and claim his status, and it's like, I wasted a week of my life doing all this paperwork and all that, and it's like he didn't file for his status, and it's like you didn't file for your status, and you wonder why you lost. And even that, the sheriff even told him on the slide in the hallway, he told him, the reason why you lost, you didn't file your paperwork, and that's what he said to him in the hallway. So, people have their ways. They get set in their ways that they think that this is the way they're going to win, where, I'm not going to do it the white man's way, as I hear from several natives. I got several natives I'm working with now that are getting it. But I've heard this from several natives I've been dealing with for years. I'm not doing it the white man way. And I said, well, you got to learn the white man way of the court for you to win. You got to play their game to win. Once you win, then they won't do nothing with you. That's like the biggest court case that came out where pot or hemp is lawful now came from Kansas. That was a case, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm the one who wrote it for the native Indian that won the case. Because pot and hemp is lawful, not legal. The 1937 Marijuana Stamp Act was done by Congress, and remember, Congress is a foreign corporation. So it's doing what it is, and I don't have it off the top of my head. I'll tell you here, and I can email this one to anybody who wants it. I'll be more than willing to give this information out. But let me go, I'll read you part of the code here on hemp. Because this is the one thing that people, and it's like the right to travel, and I'll email this out to you because I just got the information because the Bar Association just came out and said, oh, you have the right to travel. The Bar Association said they can't arrest you for traveling. So I've got that put together in an affidavit to send out. And I'm not pushing it myself because I'd love to be traveling right now. I should be traveling. But, they've already got these things on me to shoot me on sight, and they've robbed my house when I was in ICU last November. The police department, and the mayor, and the sheriff's department robbed my house. My neighbor said, I was in ICU for a week with another heart attack, and so I get home, and the neighbors are all telling me how the police department went in and robbed my home, and I'm like, would anybody sign an affidavit? They said, hell no, we're not going to lose our job or be harassed or, be pulled over and lose, have our family harassed. And I'm like, but then you come to me, and that's how my family was destroyed because everybody came to me for help, and I helped everybody, and then my family was destroyed, but nobody came to me in my defense when I helped them to defend their family. So it's really sad when we go through these situations that, who, what, why, and how, if that makes sense. So anyhow, U.S. Code 1996A, traditional Indian religion use, peyote, hemp, whatever you want to call it, mushrooms, any of that stuff. And this was held in the United States court in 1990, and this was under the First Amendment. And this was a case under the Employment Division versus Smith, 494 U.S. 872, 1990. So the guy failed a drug test, and that's what they went after him for, and that's how he won that under it. And they say, you know, and I have that with all the other codes and administrative rules and the other court cases in it. And I'll be happy to send that to anybody who sends me an email. So it's knowing that. And then it follows under Public Law 103-141, and that is under 42 U.S.C. 2000BB-1. So that's under public law. It's already filed under public law. So it does matter how these things really do work. You know, and that's the one thing. That's why I don't go and you know, on these other structures that people want to go off on religion, because religion comes from a foreign country. It's not native. It's not American. Because the natives always believe in the Great Spirit, you know. Mother Earth, the Creator. Creator was considered man that gave birth. Woman took care of the home and gave birth. Without man and woman, there was no food. There was no shelter. There was no life. You know, this new stuff that they're doing to us nowadays, they're trying to convince us a new way. You know, that's hurting the kids more today than they ever have. So anything else? Okay, and then I'll put it up to, you can type in legal rights to inland water, applicable laws for lakes, bays, and rivers. But they can't charge you tags to have a boat tag. They can't charge you this stuff. So,
hey, Ed?
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Where can I get all the information about all the treaties that were written without them being manipulated? Where could I find that?
You could the Learn Me Treaty you can type in. It's not manipulated, and I could email that one to you.
Okay.
And I think you have the rights to the water and land and water rights, don't you, on bays?
No, you didn't send that to me. This is David from Texas.
Let me go over here and let me remember your email. Send me an email and I'll re-email it to you because I'm on the internet right now.
Okay.
So send me an email. I've got it up. I'll save these pages. So anybody who emails me, I'll send you these pages so you actually got them. You can refer them back. I have the actual hemp law that is filed in Congress, that is run by Congress, of it stating that they can't charge you for hemp crimes or pot crimes. That's where Donald Trump came out in, I think it was in April, that said hemp was lawful, not legal anymore. And I've argued with people on that even recently. And it's like, no, you know, and you can type in Donald Trump, marijuana lawful, and it will come up. So, and this is the United States court case. This was done in October 28th, 2014. It is the court cases that I have that made sure that hemp was lawful, not legal. And that goes against the 1937 Marijuana Stamp Act. You know, but some of their main points, they go on reservations, but see, you got to remember, the United States of 48 states technically is a reservation. So that's the one thing that people don't get. We're all still a reservation. The United States was termed a reservation in the 1970 Indian Treaty Act, or the 1770 Indian Treaty Act with the British government. That was 1770. So, and I've got this stuff, and it should be posted on the website, new.org and trackers already. I believe it is. So, and I can't tell you exactly where it is on the website right now because I haven't been on the website and followed up on some of this stuff lately. Because the last couple of months, I've been in and out of the hospital. So, we got webmaster has been busy too. He's been busy on a lot of his projects too. So, we're getting up things the best we can. So, but definitely, I'll get that out for everybody. So send me an email and I'll get that out to you a little later. So anybody else got comments or thoughts?
Yeah, it sounds like you're feeling pretty good. Your surgery must have gone okay?
No, the surgery didn't go as well as planned. I'm still having breathing issues. I'm back on oxygen, so I got to go back in Tuesday and see what the hell is going on.
Well, David in the thumb thinks you shouldn't have done the stint, but anyway.
Yeah, no, they did a stint to me, so I don't know. It was actually, they said they should have done 2 stents, but they only did 1 in me to open up the vein. I had 2 veins that were collapsed, and I don't know why they didn't do the other one. So it didn't make sense to me.
Well, you still sound fired up, so at least they didn't kill you, huh?
Oh, no, they'll never do that one.
Okay.
I'll be coming from my grave back to raise hell, so they can't get away with that. And it's like everybody keeps saying, I don't believe in God and the way I talk about it, so you're going to hell. And I said, great, then I'm going to hell to take over. Well, better beware, because he's going to have somebody coming over kicking his ass out of his house.
Yeah.
So.
Well, good to hear you. I'm glad you're here tonight. Good to hear you.
So, yeah, if I was back in the hospital tonight, which almost happened, I would have still been on the air. So, no big deal. I would still be here. So, anyhow, so with that, anybody else got anything else? So, with that, then email me. Make sure you email me at least twice, sometimes 3 times. I will be posting this up on the YouTube channel, on the YouTube channel deal, so it might be like 100 or 140 comments, because I have another one that's, I think the highest one I got is 117. And so I'll be putting all this stuff up there within the next 24 hours on the YouTube channel, so you go back and skim through that and look at the administrative rules and laws and the statutes. So with that, then we'll call it an evening, and may the Creator look over you. May mainly Father take care of you. And without Mother and Father, we don't have life, so may Mother keep your food on your table. So with that, we'll catch up to you next week.
Thanks, Ed.
All right. Thank you very much for listening to the Disclaimers by Ed Johnston. It is today, February 29th, 2020. It's a Saturday because that's the only time that Ed's allowed anymore, because he'd do every day if he could. And then he'd be dead. Then he'd be dead. So with that, we'll see you next week, unless Ed decides to kick the bucket in between that time. That's up to him, though, not anybody else.
Don't encourage that.
Hey, that's up to you, man, not anybody else. So we'll see you guys next week, and be well. And if you are wondering about a lot of this information that has been given out, Organ Trackers on YouTube is available, and new.organtrackers.com is a website that has been worked on and is continually being worked on to get more information out for you guys. Also, do all the Fedbook stuff that Ed has, the different groups that he's got there. So with that, guys, thank you very much, and we will see you next week.